Would you believe it if I told you that one of the most joyful, most chaotic celebrations at this year's 2026 World Cup is actually a ritual summoning spirits from ancient graves? In the heart of New York, thousands of people are sitting on the ground, wildly reenacting a rowing motion called the Viking Row. But behind the laughter and joy lies a curse dating back thousands of years, one that most fans have no idea they're reenacting. That motion originated in a land so beautiful it could kill, where snow-capped mountains plunge straight into the sea, where fjords cut deep and dark, and where winters stretch on so long, the sun seems to disappear entirely. Norway is so beautiful, people call it paradise, but that very beauty once drove thousands of people down a path that turned them into warriors who made all of Europe tremble for centuries. To understand why that rowing motion was born, and why a land as beautiful as paradise could turn people into such fearsome warriors, let's find out right after this. In geography, this is called a fjord, narrow inlets carved out by retreating glaciers millions of years ago. But to the ancient Norwegians, they didn't call it by a scientific term. They called it home, and sometimes a tomb. Look at the structure of a typical fjord. You are standing on water that plunges 1,300 meters deep. Look up, and on either side of you are sheer rock walls rising over 1,000 meters straight into the sky. No shores, no slopes, no way out. To enter a fjord is to step into a massive stone U-shaped trap. And that trap is at its most ruthless when winter arrives. Because the cliffs are so high, from October to March of the following year, the sun can never clear the peaks to shine down into the valley. What does that mean? There were Viking villages that lived, raised children, and died in total, absolute darkness for 5 agonizing months every single year. They could see the dawn on the distant mountain peaks, but beneath their feet they were engulfed only by cold and shadow. Norway's nature is not just beautiful. It is silently stripping away humanity's most basic condition for life. To understand the terror of living beneath those stone walls, let's travel back in time to a winter night nearly a century ago. January 7th, 1934. It is 4 o'clock in the morning. The entire Tafjord Valley is buried in deep sleep. No one knows that an invisible crack has just torn through the mountaintop above them. Suddenly, a massive block of stone, 3 million cubic meters of rock, detaches from the sheer face and crashes into the deep fjord below. 3 million cubic meters of rock, free falling from hundreds of meters high. The sheer weight slamming into the water births a living nightmare. A tsunami is born within the narrow fjord. It is 62 meters tall. Can you even picture that? It's higher than a 20-story building. And because the fjord is so narrow, The wave has no room to dissipate. It travels at the speed of a freight train, tearing straight into the mainland. 2 villages gone in less than 10 seconds. 40 sleeping souls, most of them would never be found. The fjord swallowed them whole, silent and cold, as if nothing had ever happened. You might think, is this just a story of the past, from a time before modern technology? No. Right now, at this exact moment as you are listening to these words, a mountain named Oknes is moving. It moves very slowly, just a few millimeters per year, but it is shifting. 54 million tons of rock are shuddering, creeping down toward the fjord below. Norwegian scientists have installed the most advanced sensors available. They have evacuation plans, and sirens are tested weekly. Everyone knows that one day this mountain will collapse, and a tsunami even more catastrophic than the 1934 disaster will wipe everything away once again. Yet, at the very base of that death mountain, people still live. They still farm. They still wake up every morning, brew a cup of coffee, and look out the window, staring straight at the very thing they know will one day end their lives. When journalists arrived and asked a resident there, "Why don't you leave? Why gamble your life in a place like this?" the man simply paused for a moment and replied, "Our grandparents stayed here. Our parents stayed here. This is our home." The Norwegian fjords are among the most magnificent landscapes on Earth, but they are also among the most dangerous. The people who built their lives here thousands of years ago understood both realities at the same time. They knew this place was beautiful, and they knew it could take their lives at any moment. And yet they stayed. They refused to run away, because the entrapment of these stone cliffs was still nothing compared to what was about to fall from the sky. Imagine waking up tomorrow, preparing for a normal morning, but the clock strikes 8 a.m., then 9 a.m., then noon, and the sky outside your window remains pitch black. You reassure yourself, the sun will rise tomorrow. But tomorrow comes, and it is still nothing but a silent night. A week passes, then a month, then 2. This isn't some crazy premise from a sci-fi movie. This is the reality that unfolds every single year in Svalbard and Tromu, Norway. They call it the polar night. In Tromu, the sun vanishes completely from November until January of the following year. And in the remote archipelago of Svalbard, absolute darkness reigns supreme for 4 agonizing months. 4 months without a single ray of sunlight. The temperature plunges to -30 degrees Celsius, accompanied by howling gales tearing at 100 kilometers per year outside your door. You are trapped within 4 walls because out there is absolutely no reason to step outside. Darkness here is not merely the absence of light. It is a heavy psychological entity slowly suffocating the human will. Modern medicine has a very clinical term for this condition, seasonal affective disorder. But that academic name can never capture its ruthless reality. It is a feeling of total stagnation, utter disorientation, and a lingering despair that whispers, morning will never come. In Svalbard today, there is an unwritten rule among families. They never close their curtains, even at 3 a.m. Why? Because when the darkness inside and the darkness outside become one, you lose your mind. That uniformity erases any concept of time. Many who live here share that they gradually forget what sunlight feels like. Not conceptually in their memories, their bodies forget. Their skin forgets the warm, tingling sensation of a real sunbeam touching their face. If modern humans, equipped with electricity, heaters, and technology, still struggle this badly, think about the ancient Norse, the early Vikings. How did they survive these endless months, when all they had were flickering whale-fat torches and wood fires that were rapidly running out? But the darkness of the polar night was nothing compared to a real event that branded itself into the psyche of the Norse people, turning their terror into faith. In the year 536 AD, a catastrophic volcanic eruption, believed to be in Iceland, spewed a massive cloud of ash into the atmosphere, blanketing the entire northern hemisphere. The sun was dimmed for 18 consecutive months. Crops failed across Europe and Asia, and global temperatures plummeted. In the Scandinavian peninsula, this disaster was a generational slaughter. It is estimated that 1/3 of the population died of starvation and cold. Those who managed to survive that nightmare had no written language to record history. They had only one way to pass it down to the next generation: storytelling. They turned that horrifying memory into myth. They called it Fimbulwinter, 3 consecutive winters with no summer in between, the harbinger of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods and the end of the world. As it turns out, the stories of Odin, Thor, frost giants, and the apocalypse were not products of a vivid imagination. They were born from a real event, a real darkness, and a real mass extinction. The Vikings didn't invent the end of the world. They were simply remembering what their ancestors had netted. The brutality of this land stretches from the past and leaves bizarre traces to this very day. Take the town of Longyearbyen in Svalbard, home to about 2,500 residents. It has schools, a hospital, and even a surprisingly good Thai restaurant. But there is one thing this town will never have: a functioning cemetery. Because in Longyearbyen, dying is illegal. Or more precisely, it is forbidden to be buried here. Scientists discovered that the permafrost here preserves corpses so perfectly that they cannot decompose. This means that deadly pathogens and viruses from hundreds of years ago remain completely intact within those bodies, threatening to resurface at any moment. Therefore, if you are terminally ill or nearing death, you are immediately evacuated by plane to mainland Norway. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. A land so harsh that even death itself is not allowed to happen. And yet people still stay here. They still bear children, build families, and call this place home. Why? Because if they left these sheltering cliffs, if they escaped this darkness to step out into the wider world, they would face something far more terrifying, something called starvation. Everything we have just witnessed, from the mountains waiting to collapse to the endless gloom of the polar night, all of it shaped a clan with a deeply unique relationship with Mother Earth. To them, land was never enough. 3%. That is the total arable land across the entire territory of Norway. Just a meager 3% of soil capable of growing crops and sustaining human life. The rest is nothing but barren rock, permafrost, and brutal, sheer cliffs. And upon that tiny percentage, for centuries, an entire civilization had to claw, scratch, and fight just to survive. Let's look at their survival math. They had exactly 90 days of a growing season each year to plant and harvest before the frost returned to wipe everything out. Meanwhile, between the 8th and 10th centuries, the population here suddenly doubled. Land wasn't multiplying, but the mouths to feed were growing every single day. Modern archaeological discoveries have uncovered a heartbreaking truth. Norse skeletons from the pre-expedition era bear profound marks of severe malnutrition. They suffered from rickets, worn teeth, and severe deficiencies. Before the Vikings became the world's ultimate nightmare, they were just gaunt, starving farmers pushed into a dead end. June 8, 793 AD, at the peaceful Lindisfarne monastery off the northern coast of England, the monks were calmly performing their morning prayers, just like any other day. Then, from the sea, the dragon ships appeared. They tore through the water at terrifying speeds, faster than any vessel the English had ever seen. There was no warning, no negotiation. The attack was swift, brutal, and over in a matter of hours. In the chronicles that followed, the surviving monks wrote in utter shock, describing them as inhuman monsters, a punishment from God, something that should not exist on this earth. But there was one thing the Anglo-Saxon monks back then did not know, and had no way of knowing. The men stepping off those dragon ships had not eaten a full meal in weeks. Behind them, across that vast ocean, were their children and wives, clinging to life on the brink of starvation back home. They had gambled their lives to cross a tempestuous sea that by all rights should have killed them long ago. They were not monsters born with a thirst for blood. They were desperate men. To reach the shores of England or France, Viking ships had to conquer the death-trap waters of their own homeland first, most notably Saltstraumen, the strongest tidal current on the planet. Every 6 hours, 400 million cubic meters of seawater are forced through a narrow strait just 150 meters wide. Its terrifying power generates deep, roaring maelstroms, creating a thundering sound you can hear clearly from 10 kilometers away. Yet the Vikings learned to navigate their open-top wooden boats without a shred of protection, straight through those violent waters. They did it in the dead of night, while the countdown on their children's lives back home was measured by every single pound of wheat, every single piece of meat they could bring back. When we understand that context, the Viking raids suddenly take on a completely different face. They are no longer the arrogant, triumphant expeditions of conquerors looking down from above. It looks like the act of a father who has been backed completely into a corner with no choice left but to become the terror in order to protect his family. This is what truly made the Vikings, not a bloodthirsty nature, not a cruel lineage, and not some dark force lurking in their souls. It was humanity's response to a nature that knew no mercy. The story of a resilient people who refused to be wiped off the map of the world. And the moment we realize that, a profound shift in emotion begins to take place. The fear, the shivers that have gripped you since the start of this video suddenly give way to something else entirely. History has spent far too many pages writing about the Viking warriors stepping onto the decks of their ships, but it has forgotten to weep for those left behind. Behind every dragon ship that departed, there was a village left with only the elderly, the women, and the little children. When the men carried away the tribe's last hope and plunged into the stormy seas, they left behind a terrifying silence. Imagine the mothers and wives who had to sit by a dying fire through 4 months of the polar night's darkness, watching their children wither away from hunger. They had no idea where their loved ones were out in that vast ocean. Had they found food, or had they been swallowed by the violent waves? There was no news, only a hopeless, endless waiting. The Vikings had to accept becoming the most ruthless monsters in the eyes of the world, trading physical and mental scars just to bring a few sacks of barley back to their valley. Between becoming a cursed villain hated by the entire world and sitting idly watching their families slowly die in the dark, they chose to pick up the axe. That was not glory. That was a heartbreaking trade-off for survival. Yet, it was precisely during those centuries of being besieged by stone, tombs, darkness, and starvation that a spirit of steel was quietly forged. Nature did not give them an easy way out, so it forced them to become great. And now, look at how the people who stepped out of that adversity have changed this world. In the year 1000 AD, a Norwegian man named Erikson led a crew of 35 men, setting sail straight out into the Western Ocean. Keep in mind, at that time, they had no electronic compasses, no maps, and absolutely no concept of what lay ahead. The only things they had were the guidance of the stars, the color of the water, and the behavior of seabirds. And they achieved the unthinkable, stepping foot onto the shores of North America. Exactly 500 years before Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. Leif Erikson called this new land Vinland. They stayed there for a single winter, then set sail for home once again. They didn't come to conquer. They didn't come to claim sovereignty. They went simply because they wanted to know what was on the other side of the ocean. The vast ocean, the very thing that had been the terror, the tomb of their ancestors for generations, had now taught them how to read it, transforming them into the greatest seafaring masters the world had ever seen. February 1943. Norway is under Nazi occupation. Inside a heavily fortified industrial facility buried deep within the mountains called Vemork, the Germans are aggressively producing heavy water, a core, critical component needed to build an atomic bomb. If they succeed, the global balance of power will completely collapse. 6 Norwegian men are tasked with stopping that catastrophe. In the dead of a freezing winter, they ski across a barren plateau, a place with weather conditions harsh enough to kill any elite army on Earth. Shrouded in pitch darkness, they rappel down a near-vertical cliff, infiltrate the plant, and plant explosives that obliterate the entire production system. Once the mission is complete, there are no helicopters coming to rescue them. Those 6 men continue to ski for 200 kilometers across brutal snow-swept mountains to escape into Sweden. The mission is a resounding success, crippling Hitler's nuclear program for years. Many historians believe these 6 men completely altered the outcome of World War II. 6 human beings, pairs of skis, and a ruthless winter, the kind of winter that could break anyone, except those born and raised in its very heart. By 1888, a Norwegian scientist and explorer named Fridtjof Nansen made a shocking announcement. He was going to cross Greenland on skis, traveling from the east coast to the west, a journey across a frozen expanse where no one had ever survived. People called him a madman. Someone asked him, "If you hit a massive blizzard midway or collapse from exhaustion, how do you plan to turn back?" Nansen gave a brief reply, one that would become the ultimate life philosophy for an entire nation. "We don't need a way back, because we will start from a barren, unpopulated coast. The only way out is forward." And he did it. 40 days and nights pushing through the great ice sheet of the Earth. This same man would later almost touch the North Pole, design the Nansen passport that saved millions of refugees after World War I, and be honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. He was a human being entirely molded by a land that taught him one thing. In this life, there is no such concept as turning back. There is only one direction to go: forward. The fjords that once imprisoned them, they learned to master and navigate. the darkness that once haunted their minds. They learned to see through, to read the constellations. The land that once starved them forged them into the greatest conquerors in human history. The Viking Row celebration you saw at the beginning of this video, the sight of thousands of people laughing and rowing in the heart of a magnificent Times Square. They aren't just cheering for a football team. They are carrying something much greater than that. Something ancient. Something paid for in blood and bone. It is a memory carved deep into every fiber of their muscle, every fragment of their bone. The memory of a generation of ancestors who had 1,000 reasons to fall, to give up, but chose to refuse to vanish. As the storms of history passed, the brutal land of yesteryear stopped imprisoning its people in starvation. The meager 3% of arable land from the old days has now been replaced by smart agricultural technologies, and the freezing ocean that once claimed so many lives has unlocked energy treasures, transforming Norway into one of the most prosperous and happiest nations on the planet. The fear that once besieged past generations has over time transformed into a profound appreciation for life. Modern Norwegians no longer need to shoulder axes and step onto dragon ships to fight for survival from other nations. They live in harmony with nature, turning the very cliffs of death and dark winters into a unique identity that the entire world admires. Now, as we look back at the chaotic Viking Row celebration in Times Square, we finally understand its full meaning. It is not a glorification of past wars or ancient atrocities. It is a release. It is a declaration from a generation living in peace, proving that their ancestors conquered the darkness and their bloodline triumphed over the ruthless destiny of nature. They row in the heart of New York with radiant smiles because they know they are living for the fathers who perished out at sea and for the mothers who silently withered away in the shadows of the fjords so long ago. That rhythmic pounding drum and those powerful movements are no longer symbols of despair. They have become an anthem of life, of pure joy, and of boundless gratitude for the survival journey of their forefathers. Every wound will eventually heal. Every pain will eventually fade. A harsh nature forged the most resilient of human beings, so that today they can smile and proudly tell their story to the world. And when the final cheers of the match die down, when the flashing lights of the football festival fade away, that land returns to its primal self, an eternal silence. The land is still here. The fjords. The darkness. The silence. And somewhere out there tonight, someone is still rowing.